Welcome back. We're in the world today now. Tensions are yet to die down over the anti-lockdown protests in China. In fact, some of the protesters claim they're now being targeted by the clampdowns by the police, who've been harassing most of them about their whereabouts. Officials today renewed a promise to speed up efforts to vaccinate older people. Vaccination rates among elderly people are relatively low, and China has recorded a record number of new cases in recent days. Now, over the weekend, thousands in China took to the streets demanding an end to the COVID lockdowns, with some even making rare calls for President Xi to stand down. On Monday, however, planned protests in Beijing did not happen after officers surrounded the assembly point. In Shanghai, large banners were erected along the main protest route and police made several arrests. The demonstrations began after a fire in a high-rise block in Urumqi, Western China, killed 10 people. On Thursday, many Chinese believe COVID restrictions contributed to the deaths, although the authorities deny this. Speaking of COVID cases, mainland China on Monday reported 3,561 locally transmitted confirmed COVID-19 cases and 63 imported ones. The Health Commission says among the cases, 1,168 were reported in the Guangdong province, 957 in the capital Beijing, and 209 in southwest China's Chongqing municipality. There were no new deaths from COVID on Monday. A total of 2,786 COVID-19 patients, 67 imported cases, and 2,719 local ones were discharged from hospital after recovery on the mainland on a Monday. Number of severe cases increased by 2 from the previous day, and 225,224 close contacts were released from medical observation. But China's health ministry says it's leaving nothing to chance, as it says it plans to speed up the COVID-19 vaccinations and will release information to the public in due course. Director of the National Health Bureau of Disease Control and Prevention, Jia Gang, made a comment at the regular National Health Commission news conference when asked if foreign vaccines will become available. He did not elaborate on exactly how vaccinations will be sped up. Another supervisory official of the National Disease Control and Prevention Administration, Cheng Yongquan, said public complaints about China's COVID-19 curbs stem from overzealous implementation, particularly when applied with a one-size-fits-all approach rather than from the measures themselves. China, which has pursued a strict zero-COVID policy that results in frequent snap lockdowns, has recently seen a surge in cases with more than 23,000 new infections reported on Thursday, which is the most since April. And from the Chinese Foreign Ministry, spokesperson Zhao Lijiang says the country is one with rule of law and all rights and freedoms of Chinese citizens are protected by using the framework within the law. He made comments similar anti-lockdown protests hold in other parts of the world, condemning China's COVID policy. And at almost every site, protesters have called for an end to China's onerous COVID prevention policies. A country of 1.4 billion people has spent nearly 3 years living with some of the strictest COVID curbs in the world, even as most other countries have tried to coexist with the virus. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken has voiced his country's support for the protests going on against China's COVID lockdowns. He supports people expressing their views peacefully. A message comes as the protests intensified over the weekend, the biggest civil disobedience since President Xi Jinping took power a decade ago. It comes as a number of COVID cases hit record daily highs and large parts of the cities faced new lockdowns.
When it comes to protests that we're seeing in China, protests that we're seeing for different reasons in Iran, in other places, our position is the same everywhere, which is that we support the right of people everywhere to peacefully protest, to make known their views, their concerns, and their frustrations.
To other issues now, China's ally in the Korean Peninsula, North Korea, has held a public health and anti-epidemic exhibition. In a video made available by state media KCNA, visitors were seen looking around at the exhibition hall where various products including medical services and health food were displayed at the sci-tech complex. The media said more than 3,000 papers on scientific and technological achievements for emergency anti-epidemic works and over 1,800 kinds of medicines, medical appliances, health food, sanitary goods, IT products were introduced at the exhibition. And local officials in Thailand say a small Buddhist temple has been left without any monks after they were all dismissed for failing drug tests. 4 monks, including the abbot, tested positive for methamphetamine in the northern province of Phetchabun, according to official news reports. One of the monks said that they were subsequently sent to a health clinic to undergo drug rehabilitation. The raid on the monasteries come amid a national campaign to tackle drug trafficking. The monks were reportedly removed from the temple after police administered urine tests on Monday, where saw all 4 men fail. Officials did not say what had brought the temple to the attention of police. Our British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak says the so-called golden era of relations with China are over, saying Beijing's systemic challenge to Britain's interests and values are growing more acute. It was his first major foreign policy speech. Prime Minister Sunak said Britain's approach to China needs to evolve, and Beijing is consciously competing for global influence using all the levers of state power. Some in Sunak's Conservative Party have been critical of him, regarding him as less hawkish on China than his predecessor Liz Truss. Last year, when he was finance minister, he called for a nuanced strategy on China to balance human rights concerns while expanding economic ties. However, a planned meeting between Sunak and China's President Xi Jinping at this month's G20 summit in Bali fell through. Last week, London banned Chinese-made security cameras from sensitive government buildings.
Of war. It defies belief. Now let's be clear, the so-called golden era is over, along with the naive idea that trade would automatically lead to social and political reform. But nor should we rely on simplistic Cold War rhetoric. We recognise China poses a systemic challenge to our values and interests, a challenge that grows more acute as it moves towards even greater authoritarianism. Instead of listening to their people's protests, the Chinese government has chosen to crack down further, including by assaulting a BBC journalist. The media and our parliamentarians must be able to highlight these issues without sanction, including calling out abuses in Xinjiang and the curtailment of freedom in Hong Kong. The pace of geopolitical change is intensifying. Our adversaries and competitors plan for the long term. After years of pushing at the boundaries, Russia is challenging the fundamental principles of the UN Charter. China is conspicuously competing for global influence using all the levers of state power. Now, in the face of these challenges, short-termism or wishful thinking will not suffice. We can't depend on Cold War arguments or approaches, or mere sentimentality about our past. So we will make an evolutionary leap in our approach.
To the Middle East now, where 3 Palestinian men have been killed by Israeli police in 2 separate incidents in the occupied West Bank. 2 were brothers in their 20s who were reportedly shot dead as clashes broke out with Israeli troops near Ramallah. Israeli military said suspects threw petrol bombs at troops during an operation and they returned fire. A 3rd man was shot dead after 2 Israeli army jeeps out of patrol broke down near Hebron. The military said its forces were shot at and that improvised explosives were thrown at them. Israel carries out search and arrests almost every night in the West Bank, where at least 140 Palestinians have been killed this year, mostly by Israeli fire. Quickly now to the United States. 5 police officers in the state of Connecticut have been charged after a man that they arrested was partially paralyzed in the back of a police van. Randy Cox was being driven to a police station in New Haven when the driver braked hard, causing him to be flung headfirst against the van's rear doors. He was being held on a June 19 gun charges that were later dropped. Civil rights advocates compared a 36-year-old's ordeal with the case of another black man in Baltimore in 2015. Freddie Gray died after suffering a spinal injury while handcuffed and shackled in a police van. The 5 officers in the Connecticut case were charged on Monday with reckless endangerment and cruelty, which are misdemeanor or minor counts. Officers say the police van braked suddenly to avoid a collision at an intersection. Police body camera footage shows the driver stopping suddenly and repeatedly honking the horn. A video also shows some officers mocking Cox and accusing him of faking his injuries. In the clip, officers dragged Cox by his feet to place him in a holding cell. He was then transported to hospital. Our Washington correspondent Maria Bird joins us now. Maria, I mean, this is just really heartbreaking, just learning what happened to him. He was perfectly okay before the arrest. So how badly were the officers treating Randy Cox, and what is his condition now?
This is what Americans have been considering excessive use of force. This has been a very serious concern of many Americans for the past few years. As you talk back to the Freddie Gray case, we can look back to Trayvon Martin case, and obviously, most recently, several other cases that have existed. But this is an excessive use of force. As you stated, this was an illegal possession of a firearm, what he was arrested for. And unless he was resisting arrest, when you show the image of him being carried by 4 officers that look to be, much larger than he was, considering that type of force that was used to push him in, and if you read the details of the way he was treated inside of that vehicle, there was an abrupt stop by the driver, which caused him to hit his head against the van. There was no seating arrangements for him. And so when you talk about the type of force that can cause someone to be paralyzed, that would definitely be characterized as an excessive use by force. And some might even go as far as, and I know that it's being investigated now, an abuse of power by those officers.
So again, what is his condition now? I mean, is he still in hospital? Is he out?
He's now into recovery rehabilitation stages, but obviously this is going to be a long road of recovery for him. And so I think that the question now is going to be, what will be the next steps through this investigation, and how will he be compensated?
Exactly, Maria. And what punishment will be meted out on those officers who were charged? And, why is it taking so long before, we're learning about this? What happened that day?
Well, the officers typically go on an administrative leave of absence. They will obviously then likely be reviewed for whether or not they should be allowed to keep their job. And as you mentioned, it's taken us a long time to find all of this out, because obviously investigation had to occur. And just to be very honest, typically police units try to ensure that information regarding police officers is limited until they are very sure and confident that the appropriate investigation has been done before information is released. And so this is another situation where you're going to likely either see a prosecution brought up and a case brought up against these officers. But the real question is, will they be able to have enough charges brought against the officers that the state will be able to prosecute against them? And then will it lead to a conviction due to the fact that, as you mentioned, Randy Cox has been paralyzed as a result of the arrest?
I'm wondering the kind of precedence it sets, for police brutality in the United States. And I say that against, the Black Lives Matter movements that have held in the past few years, and the brutality we have seen in America against Black people in the United States, as well as police brutality. Is there some sort of hope? The officers being charged, is there some hope that things would change, or that, for once, in a very long time. The authorities are really listening.
Well, I think there's always hope, right, that there will be some sort of change. The question is, where's the action behind many of the things that are being noted in many of the cases that have occurred? And as you mentioned, the precedents. And so where we are currently, I think, as a country, is being able to see the action behind it. We're in a really tough situation currently in the U.S. Economically, we're challenged. We still have a lot of infrastructure challenges. If you look at the city of Baltimore where this occurred, there's a lot of challenge there. And so until we're able to address some of the holistic issues within the United States, I think it's going to be very hard to really move past what we've seen with police brutality. We also know there's always the underpinning of racism, classism in America that continues to show and continues to be a challenge as we talk about cases like this.
Maria, thanks again. Welcome back to the program. Police and mechanical failure on Tuesday prevented at least 2 boatloads of refugees from leaving France as mild weather and calm seas prompted a rush to the Channel breaches. The mayor of the village of Sangatte near Calais said 49 migrants had been forced to turn back, but another 100 made it to the high seas. One migrant who did not want to speak on camera said the boat she tried to travel on had had an engine failure and police arrived soon after. Sangatte Mayor Didier Allemand said faced with beefed up security along France's Channel coast, maple smugglers have evolved a taxi boat method. Rather than launching a boat with a large number of people, it launches elsewhere and picks up migrants who have to wade into the water. It's the first spell of calm weather since Britain and France struck a fresh deal to stem the tide of people seeking refuge in the UK. However, Spanish authorities say 3 stowaways have been found sitting on a rudder of a ship after completing an 11-day voyage from Nigeria. A photo shared by the Coast Guard shows the men sitting on a rudder at the oil tanker's stern, a feet less than a meter away from the water. They were taken to hospital at a tanker's destination in Gran Canaria and treated for moderate dehydration. It's unclear if they spent the entire journey perched on the rudder. The Maltese-flagged Altini II arrived in Las Palmas, Gran Canaria, from the Nigeria city of Lagos, a journey of more than 2,700 nautical miles, according to data collected by maritime tracking websites. The men were seen by medics at the dock, where they were found and were taken to hospital soon after. Speaking of Nigeria, 2 bronze medals, 2 bronzes from Benin are among 6 objects being returned to the country by the Horniman Museum in London. The items were stolen 125 years ago by British soldiers in Benin City. Professor Abba Tijani, Director General of the National Commission for Museums and Monuments, said he believes the right thing has been done, adding that he's hopeful more precious objects will be returned by other institutions in due course. Our senior London correspondent Juliana Olainka reports.
Splendid, spiritual, spectacular, and finally back in the hands of those who own them. More than 125 years after they were stolen by British soldiers from the Kingdom of Benin, the Horniman Museum in southeast London have accepted that now is the time to return Nigeria's precious objects. And with it, the British establishment has returned a small but incredibly symbolic part of Nigeria's rich history and majestic culture.
To witness a major collection being returned back is quite significant, and we're hoping it will indicate the trends to come. We have our largest collections of Benin bronze works outside of Benin or outside of Nigeria in the London Museum, and those pieces are ours and should be returned.
My name's Nick Merriman. I'm Chief Executive of the Horniman Museum and Gardens.
Last night's historic ceremony may have seen just 6 of the 72 items held here at the Horniman being delivered back to Nigeria. However, there are plans for more returns.
We have the duty to appreciate
significantly those institutions that have responded to that worldwide calling. We are at Cambridge, and we are here, and I'm sure we'll still go back to Cambridge and some other institutions. So it's a process, and it's a way of saying thank you for responding in the proper way, and to also encourage and give a signal to those who are still holding on tight to this artifact that they should go to where they belong.
According to Professor Abba Tijani, the Director General of the National Commission for Museums and Monuments in Nigeria, there are over 5,000 Benin bronzes scattered around the world in museums. The pressure is now on to see that they are given back to their rightful owner.
So whether you're in Seattle or Stockholm, or in fact most major Western cities in between, there may well be Benin bronzes in your local museum. And also, they are amongst Africa's greatest cultural treasures, and the way in which they were taken is, I think in today's terms, it would be seen as particularly egregious and very well documented from the British side, indeed very well photographed. I think that's why it's captured people's imagination.
The remaining 66 artefacts will remain in the UK on loan for now, but they will be returned to Nigeria on a date to be decided. Juliana Olayinka, reporting for Channels TV News in London.
Heads of governments of the East African community have been meeting in Nairobi, Kenya, to find a sustainable peace process for the troubled region of Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo. Talks come just days after African leaders declared a ceasefire in a summit in Luanda, Angola, with the aim of stopping attacks renewed by the M23 rebel group. Former Kenyan President Uhuru Kenyatta urged groups that were yet to honor the ceasefire to do so quickly in order to give way for humanitarian assistance to fleeing residents sheltered within internally displaced persons camps in North Kivu province.
It is self-evident fact that our region is united by a common yearning for peace, hope for unity, quest for opportunity, and desire for shared prosperity. For its part, Kenya reiterates its unflinching support for efforts that support diplomatic and necessary military solutions to the effective restoration of sustainable peace and stability in DRC. We emphasize that regional peace and security remains our collective enterprise.
This situation has negatively impacted our region, including the issue of hundreds of thousands of Congolese refugees who are unable to safely return to their homes.
Young groups that are yet to cease hostilities, to honor their commitments, to cease armed activities, and to grant unhindered humanitarian access, and the full deployment and operationalization of the East African Regional Force.
Hawaii's Mauna Loa, the world's largest active volcano, began erupting on Sunday for the first time since 1984, ending its longest quiet period in recorded history. The night sky above Hawaii's largest island glowed a hellish red as bright, hot lava sprang forth at the volcano's summit at around 11:30 p.m. local time on Sunday. The lava is contained within the summit, so does not threaten Hawaiians living downslope for now, according to the U.S. Geological Service. A service has warned residents, however, that volcanic gases and fine ash may drift their way. Dr. Eric Clementi, a volcanologist and professor at Denison University, said the eruption was not expected to happen right at this moment, but there were some signs it was heading in that direction.
The eruption started late last night, Hawaii time, up at the summit caldera, and has now seems to have quieted down up at the summit and opened up on the northeast rift zone. And they have some lava flows heading down that northeast side of the volcano. Luckily, not near any one at this point or anything really, but it's the first eruption of Mauna Loa for almost 39 years at this point. And it's not unexpected in the sense that Mauna Loa is probably one of the more active volcanoes on the planet, but it's also, I don't think it was expected to happen right at this moment, although there have been signs that it was heading towards something new based on some of the earthquakes that they measure underneath the volcano. It was getting restless, and then it got really restless quite quickly before this eruption last night happened.
From what I understand from the latest reports, there's new vents that opened on the northeast rift zone, which is just northeast of the summit caldera. So far, the flows are still confined into that rift zone, and they're very far from being putting anyone at risk at this point.
So how much popcorn can you eat? That's the question of the moment. Because dozens of Thais showed up with steel vats, cardboard boxes, and all sizes of plastic containers to a mall in central Bangkok on Monday after cinema offered all-you-can-eat popcorn for 199 bahts. That's just about $5.60. 39-year-old Pipat Loris Bokong said he was taking home about 57 liters of the salty snack in a huge buffet-style dish as he took part of the stunt to challenge customers to come up with quirky container ideas. The investment expert said he was planning to share the popcorn with family and friends. It looks like he might get his wish if they get to him soon enough, that is. For what would be the price of a ticket to the movies, customers also get bottomless soda refills to help slake what many expect will be a vengeful thirst from eating all of that salty popcorn. What can I say? You have to love popcorn to participate in that competition. Thanks for watching. I'm Amarachi Ubadi.